Okay, so I have some simple geometry here that I want to place inside a composited image. The image is just a piece of real estate photography. I've matched this plane to the tabletop surface, and then I've also got a sphere sitting there. And right now, because of my directional light, that sphere is also casting a bit of a shadow. So I can go up here to my interactive render and click it, and then we can double check and see how that's looking right now. There we are. So in this view, it looks like it's a little bit overexposed. So we'll want to pull that down. And I also want to give some kind of color to the cube and to the surface so they're not just looking like defaults. So let's say, and I may have been using cube and sphere interchangeably. I need to pay more attention. So I'll take my cube material and apply it to my sphere to make that purple. We could also right click to duplicate that material. And if I look over on the right hand side, I could change this to a different color just so I can kind of understand what it's up to. So I get something like that. And now when we look at our render again, it becomes a little more apparent that that shadow is a little harder. So sometimes if you leave things without even a generic material, the lighting is not going to be very accurate when you head to the rendering stage. Okay, so you can see over here I clip on this side, but that's actually okay because my shadow is falling off the side of a tabletop. I do think that shadow is a little bit hard, so I might want to soften that a bit. So I'll head over to Lights, go to my Directional Light, and then we're just going to bump up the shadow radius. And as long as we have the interactive render going, we should see that render, or rather that shadow, blow out a little bit, so that looks a lot nicer. Okay, great. So this is looking pretty good. Now we have to figure out how we're going to convince Rhino to cast a shadow onto a surface, but then hide that surface, because I want to be able to look through the transparent parts of the shadow all the way to the origin material in Photoshop, which is going to be our countertop. So to do that, we do this trick with our materials, where we make a new material, but this time, instead of generic, all the way at the bottom, we'll pick wrapper. Okay, so wrapper, the base material is going to be, what was cube number 1? Our green. Yeah, so let's rename this countertop. And actually the color isn't going to matter at all in the next step because it's going to become hidden. So the wrapper is going to wrap around a base material called countertop. We are going to activate the matte, and we're going to say go ahead and cast shadows, but also affect alpha. So when we affect the alpha, that means that we're going to have an impact on the opacity and transparency of individual pixels. And I can get a preview of the alpha if I click right here. So at the moment, all of these pixels right here are opaque, which means they're going to show up in the final image, which is not exactly what I want. Instead, with the alpha contribution, I'm going to switch that from normal to black. Okay, and then now when I do this, oh shoot, it looks like there's still one more thing to do. I know what I forgot. So right now the tabletop still has countertop associated with it and not wrapper. So I'll drag over wrapper. Boom, there we go. So now we can no longer see that green surface, even though it does appear in the preview render. And now we're just going to keep the ball and the shadow that casts out of there. Okay, so finally, the last things we'd want to do would be to come down into render output, and we would want to establish the image width and height to be the same pixel dimensions as that kitchen image. I'm not going to bother with that right now, but that's where you would do that. And then we head up here into the render, uncheck show us the alpha. We're going to get all this weird sort of gray stuff in the background, but you can just ignore that. And then I'll hit save. And that's an old version of this, so I'll call that ball on table, and the file type needs to be PNG. I'll save that, and then I will switch over to Photoshop and show you how this worked out. Okay, here it's time for our the big payoff. So I've got my kitchen image loaded up in Photoshop. I'll go to File and then Place, or it looks like Place Embedded, because we want all the content of the file to exist within the Photoshop file. I navigate to ballontable.png, so this was the file I exported from our render. Now because I neglected to make the pixel dimensions the same, the scale might be slightly off here, but I'll slide this down and you can see it looks pretty good. If I want, I can scale this thing up, although I don't know how far I can go before it starts looking a little crunchy. And then I'll just try to line up that table just right. If I need to, I can slightly rotate things if I didn't get it exactly right, and hit enter. And, because I have such a featureless perfect surface, it's not totally selling the illusion, but it's pretty good. I might want to get in here and lighten it up a little bit. You can see how this shadow is maybe not quite so black. So now I just use my Photoshop skills. For example, I would go to Layer, New Adjustment, Layer, and Levels. Check Use Previous Layer to create clipping mask because I only want to have an effect on those pixels. And then I can drag this around a little bit to change the contrast. So I want to kind of gray that thing out a little bit so it's not quite as obvious that it's fake.